Well, it was a fun note. You got to know the tau electron and or tau mu and electron or wavelet frequency and wave function. Get you into some quirky states. Firstly, this little bit right here is the smallest portion of energy, basically a photon, right? Trying to figure out the hydrogen radius there, or the forbidden transformation of the hydrogen element from earlier today. There's a triple point involved in here because when we're talking about negative energy, where what is the negative mass? Because mass exists. These all have mass parts. They all do things. We're taking steam, whether by nuclear technologies and the neutrino and having it bang around some rabbit, or the pressure vessel here, which is defined as one within ones and zeros, so it becomes a circumference. And this one's going to be a big globular because I might increase the volume of water, which is non-compressible in this case, but that is relative, so 1, 2, and 3, to whatever fluid I would have in there to boil because of the chemistry. They evaporate at different phases. So they'll have different properties. So that goes to that 3 with 2 back down to whatever tau or dark matter calculation you have into it. And so we don't really factor that. That all just goes through the pipe. This is turning. We keep that going. Most people's houses and things are going for what it does, or whatever the intended purpose of this individual piece of equipment is supposed to do. Whether they're going to say it's for politics and education and getting rid of the education system nonsense that they're trying to pull, or if it's just some military doctrine of the SATs and MVAP or ASVAB and things like that. Basically, there's still going to be a triple point where I am working the machine. There is a load against it in terms of the efficiency that is way higher as far as a calculation against this than if I even can control any of the variable inside of here. Otherwise, it'll be a direct effect against gravity, which is a negative calculation. The mass of the parts weren't necessarily conducted to do this, and while this may not be a lithium-7 reaction or sub-reaction in terms of what happened to Tickle and the Tail of the Dragon, you can imagine some service rate in hell down there on the mill floor for all the engineering that is, again, subparting there. And all these parts is not necessarily pushing it through the metal, this heat or whatever carbon or whatever was burning. It's turning that and it's pushing it through the water. The water has to have some level of 1/2 or lambda h over p inside of here about how much space this can use, if not the next two, because otherwise it's inside of here and it's a direct changeover. So probably not the rate of change that I'm looking for as a direct collapse of a black hole. You would need to understand the supernova effect of it to kind of back propagate from the middle what elements are out there, their amounts or proportions from the sigma, Kelvin, radius, or the circumference, not necessarily de Broglie's radius in this case, of the area in which somebody doing this math would exist. It's not necessarily quantifiable, but as a parcel map, you could see a point where the pressure, here in this case, how tall you stand, and the air resistance of the person. You can radically change X or Y in this notation. Water, the wood, uranium, if there is such a way to turn wind into friction, and that friction is enough to house that in some way where you're using the cooling system of that friction created from the wind to boil water, if it is ever such a way stable to do so, is going to peel off an electron because this action is changing a magnet. And much like the phases in a magnet, or this phase inside of here, 1/2, that daisy chains down the line until the emission in itself at the lowest point, in the case the light bulb, is emitting a positive photon, but is defined as it hitting something to then absorption and emissions it to say, while I'm enriching it, I'm still Compton scattering. There's an effect of a color spectrum that's not being absorbed inside of here, and it gets pretty heavy. It's not necessarily necessary for mechanically fixing a situation like this, but it is a lot of the mechanic walks into a fabric shop and tries to figure this out, whether it be an engineer or some upholstery that's necessary for the car.